All right, let's jump right into this explainer and unpack the honestly unbelievable history of Monaco. When we hear the word Monaco today, our brains instantly go to super yachts, the Monte Carlo casino, and just unimaginable wealth, right? But as we're going to see, that wasn't always the case. In fact, this state's beginnings were desperate, totally isolated, and, well, incredibly rocky. It really begs the question, doesn't it? How on earth did a barren, completely bankrupt rock transform into the most glamorous 2 square kilometers on the entire planet? What we are looking at here is the ultimate rags to riches story of the Grimaldi state. It's a wild saga of survival, a massive economic gamble, and honestly, some sheer geographic luck. Chapter 1: The Rock of Monaco. To really grasp Monaco's story, we've got to talk about its geography. 2.02. That number is the country's entire footprint in square kilometers. It is tiny. To picture that extreme physical limitation, imagine an irregular triangle squeezed right between the mountains and the Mediterranean Sea. We're talking less than 4 kilometers on any given side. It's an absolutely stunning but severely confined space. And that crazy confinement bred serious isolation. Even the name Monaco comes from the Greek word monoikos, which literally means alone. Early Mediterranean groups, like the Ligurians and later the Genoese, definitely weren't looking at this rugged coast and thinking about a luxury resort. No way. To them, this was strictly a strategic military stronghold. It was a defensible fortress rising sheer from the sea, fantastic for controlling maritime traffic, but absolutely terrible if you wanted to grow any crops. Chapter 2: The Grimaldi dynasty arrives. This is where a family enters the picture that changes literally everything. It all kicks off in 1297, and get this, Francois Grimaldi actually disguised himself as a monk, an abbot to be exact, just to sneak in and capture the Genoese fortress in the dead of night. From that crazy moment on, it was centuries of what was basically medieval ping-pong. They were constantly battling, constantly shifting alliances back and forth between France and Spain, just desperately securing treaties to keep control of their rock. I mean, survival back then was truly survival of the fittest. The Grimaldis had to walk this grueling political tightrope for centuries. They were constantly swatting away invasion threats from Ventimiglia and Provence. Their leaders were getting exiled or even thrown in prison in places like Milan or Avignon. To go from a really fragile vassal state to a recognized sovereign principality, that meant endlessly forging agreements with the papacy and royal courts. It was a completely exhausting existence. Chapter 3: The Grand Casino Gamble. So, by the 19th century, the state was just entirely exhausted. They were facing a massive existential crisis. Under Prince Florestan, Monaco was flat out bankrupt. Their agriculture had failed, the traditional fishing trade was drying up. They were literally out of options. But then, Prince Charles III makes a desperate, massive gamble. He builds the Monte Carlo casino. And the contrast is staggering. Suddenly, looking at post-1863, we see millions in revenue, brand new railway lines connecting them straight to Paris, luxury hotels springing up out of nowhere, and a booming GDP. He basically invented Monte Carlo, and incredibly, it worked. To really put this windfall into perspective, look at this number: 15 million. 15 million francs. That massive sum was raked in from a legendary 62-hour nonstop run of double-zero gambling. That single, unbelievable streak permanently changed the state's entire trajectory. It slammed the door on their old monastic era and kicked off an age of just immense, unprecedented wealth. Chapter 4: Navigating the World Wars. But of course, all that wealth couldn't buy total immunity from the outside world. Those glamorous casinos definitely couldn't protect them from global conflict. During World War I, Monaco's sovereignty was hanging by a literal thread. With the 1918 treaty, France essentially turned Monaco into a French protectorate in all but name just to survive the Great War. France actually imposed strict controls on Monaco's lifeblood, its gambling revenues, and even legally stripped the prince of his powers for the duration of the conflict. And World War II, that brought even more chaos. Prince Louis II initially tried to proclaim neutrality in 1939, but by 1942, Italian fascist forces had occupied the state. A year after that, the German military invaded and took over administration. Monaco had to quietly navigate this incredibly complex, dangerous web of refugees, secret police operations, and shifting border controls, right up until the Allied liberation in 1944. They survived, but honestly, just barely. Chapter 5: Post-War Modernization and Glamour. From those ashes, we see the rise of a total golden era, defined by Prince Rainier III. He fiercely rebuilt Monaco's sovereignty and completely modernized the state. First step, he enacted the Constitution of 1962, which formalized their institutions and pushed back against some really intense French taxation pressures. Step 2, knowing they had virtually zero space, he literally reclaimed land from the sea. That's how the Fontvieille district was created for industrial expansion. And step 3, he married the American actress Grace Kelly. That single move instantly launched Monaco's cultural status back into the global stratosphere. Their whole economic strategy during this era really boils down to this reality. Monaco successfully capitalized on commercial and financial advantages that were just less obtainable in the rest of France. They completely solidified their position as this highly sought-after financial hub. They started drawing in international businesses, entrepreneurs, and wealthy expats who were all looking for a secure, highly advantageous harbor. Chapter 6, Reclaiming a Sustainable Future. Which brings us right up to the modern day, because today, their biggest existential threat isn't a Genoese invasion or bankruptcy, it's climate change. They're a state built precariously on the edge of a rising sea. And that modern threat has sparked some truly extraordinary engineering. Get this, right below the ultimate symbol of Monaco's historic excess, the Monte-Carlo casino itself, Prince Albert II is overseeing a massive subterranean waste-crushing plant. It's built into this huge cave-like chamber and designed to process 25,000 tons of rubbish every single year. It's just a brilliant, stark contrast between their old image of endless opulence and their modern push for environmental solutions. And their Monaco 2025 targets? They are incredibly ambitious. We're talking about aiming to recycle 100% of their waste, producing renewable energy directly on site, totally eliminating greenhouse gas emissions, and, this is wild for a place with barely any open land, producing over 30% of their food locally. For a dense concrete microstate, these goals are all about transforming Monaco into a literal global pioneer of urban sustainability. So, we're left with a massive question to wrap up this explainer. The Grimaldi family has survived brutal medieval sieges, devastating plagues, absolute total bankruptcy, and 2 world wars. But as the Mediterranean waters rise, can the world's most opulent playground pull off its biggest gamble yet and survive the climate crisis? It's a fascinating, high-stakes challenge for an incredibly resilient rock. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive. I really hope you're walking away with a whole new perspective on Monaco.